Cool. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our FlockX Find Your Flock podcast. As first of a series, we're really excited to be here to be talking with you. And really, together with Erkin and myself, what we're really trying to do is focus on how individuals explore their communities, hear their stories and their insights, engage with the different third places, and see how we can get more active and meeting more people and engaging in real life. And today we're very excited to have Tiffany Falcon-Ewigleben, who's based in Grand Rapids. She is a friend of FlockX, and Tiffany has, experience in multiple different organizations. She's worked in nonprofit sector, education, B2B, media marketing, hospitality, as well as tech. And one of her more recent adventures is a shift into the art community, the art flock, and excited to just have her on talking to us about her adventures and the multiple flocks she's active in and how she enjoys exploring those. But I'll let Tiffany do a brief intro herself before we move in.
Thank you, Josh. So like Josh was saying, my most recent sort of foray into a different flocks is really focused on the arts and culture sort of experience and community in Grand Rapids and nationally and internationally. My most current role is as a project manager for an organization called Art Prize. And Art Prize is a national and international arts and cultural festival held in Grand Rapids, based in GR, but very open and democratic. We bring in artists from all over the country, all over the world, to participate in this literal competition with a public vote and juried votes for 16 to 18 days in the fall. And our whole city just transforms into this big, beautiful, amazing art gallery sort of experience where businesses and organizations and the city itself really are the curators of this art. We play host to that. We are sort of the engineers and system to create that, but the city sort of self-curates and it becomes this really amazing community experience. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Tiff, we're really excited to have you here. So I suppose it kind of to kick off the conversation, I suppose, regardless of what flock you're a part of, at the end of the day, you want to find out and be a part of all the activities. So from my perspective is, now you say, you've started this journey in a new flock. How did you start finding the community? Obviously, within Art Prize, it's a very highly organized event, so there's lots of active people. But outside of that, when the things aren't active, how are you going about finding flock members and flock activity to engage with in your interests?
So I guess I would say I have, like you were saying, a really varied and diverse sort of background. I've worked in all sorts of sectors, and a lot of the reason that I have done that is because that's sort of how I become engaged and interested in things. I don't have a very linear path or a linear career path or linear sorts of interest. I become very fascinated with lots of things because I think people are fascinating and people have interesting stories. And I think that's really the crux of finding that community. For me, especially when I'm starting this foray into really exploring arts and understanding it from a different level, I've been really lucky to work with some really talented people who do have that background. And that's helped me kind of navigate that into the community as well. But a lot of what I've done on my own is just start walking into places I wouldn't have walked into before. So maybe visiting galleries, maybe searching for meetups or seeing something posted on like our local Reddit, which is super active in the city. Anything like that, going to someplace where maybe it's kind of outside of my comfort zone, maybe I don't feel very knowledgeable about this, but that sort of curiosity has, in my experience, regardless of what the interest is, really been embraced, and people are very happy to welcome you and share their passion with you. And I think that's been the key thing that's allowed me to sort of have all these experiences in my career and in my personal life. I can even say that for a while, I wanted to put myself in spaces that maybe were not typical spaces for women to be in. So because I felt that there, I could learn from maybe different diverse perspectives from gender sort of space or even political and social spaces. So one time I walked into a cigar bar and I was like, I don't know anything about cigars. Teach me about cigars. And people were happy to help me and show these things to me and give me this education and knowledge because they were passionate about it. And I think that's been the best way for me to find out about anything I have a minute interest in and develop community and connection cross purposes. So
that's a pretty cool concept. I was curious about Tiffany is especially because the way you felt about cigars, that's in a sense how I feel about arts in a lot of aspects. I'm like, I don't, I really find it cool, but I feel like I do not have the knowledge, and it feels a little awkward at the beginning to go there. And it's like, how do I, if I want to, get myself into the arts and get myself more knowledgeable to begin with, in order to have those conversations and make friends that are within the same interest, like, what would be your recommendation as to like, how do I get started into feeling myself knowledgeable in a sense of like the arts and in the community in that aspect? Like, what would be your recommendation for someone like me who's doesn't have that much of a knowledge but appreciates the arts, to get more involved and to get more familiar with it?
for sure. That's definitely a thing, that intimidation, especially within art spheres, there's this perception that it's very, very closed and very restricted, and you have to have this education and this background in that sort of space in order to enter that space. And I think I carried that a little bit as well. And I was hesitant, even when I started working with Art Prize, to kind of put myself out there. I'm like, dude, can I have an opinion on this? Can I like this? Is this bad art? Like, what is bad art? Can I tell people like I like this? Is it bad? Are they going to think I don't know what I'm talking about? But I've kind of found it's really the opposite. I think there is this people carry a sense of so much passion about exploring all sorts of realms of the arts that it comes across very close, but it's not. I think entering a situation with a mindset of curiosity and a little bit of bravery and saying, hey, this is not my background, and I would love if you just share your opinion with me and tell me why this is good art, or what am I looking at here? How do I connect with this? What does art mean? How do I explore this and become more involved in this space in a way that maybe I don't have the background, but I still carry that passion, that curiosity, because at the end of the day, I think what art does is it moves you. It creates something that you feel. And when you see something or experience like a performance that creates those feelings and that connection, that instance can open up those conversations with people around you who are sharing those sort of feelings. So I think going into anything like that with a mindset of curiosity and openness and honesty, and hoping people are receptive and responsive to that and come back to you with that same sort of openness and willingness to share.
So how do I find myself in those scenarios? Is it like, art galleries? Or to further elaborate on that question, where can people say bump into, Tiffany or, somebody like you who's, going through this process of like, now you're obviously more familiar with the arts and everything, but, whether it is someone who's like expert level, but like people who are, to put in other words, how do people bump into someone that they can have these conversations with?
I think in this community, we're very lucky that there is a big, in Grand Rapids, there's a very strong embrace of the public arts. Arts are everywhere. There are murals. Anywhere you walk in the city, you see things. There are art and art adjacent events occurring all the time. I think sometimes finding them initially, I've noticed, has been sort of a difficulty, because maybe the way it's being communicated to people in a broad sense is not there. So you have to kind of hunt for it. But we also have a beautiful art gallery, art museum called the Graham here, and it's free for anybody on Tuesdays. So maybe you don't think you are interested in that, but walking into that space and actually just talking to a curator can lead to conversations, can lead to them sharing information about events and things that go on in the gallery, can lead to you talking to people who attend those events who maybe run smaller galleries, can lead to you knowing about poetry nights that occur at like 106 Gallery across the way, can, and if somebody's in a spot where they're admiring a piece of public art, ask them about it, talk to them about it. I think a lot of it has been somewhat serendipitous, and it spirals. You have this one conversation with somebody and they go, oh, let me introduce you to this person. You have to come here. Come to this thing tonight. It's really cool. Yeah, it just that's really been how I did it. I don't know if there is a more curated way to make that happen, to really kind of or there hasn't been for me, at least here.
Yeah, but it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you that there are probably a couple of regular places that you can always go to, like to bump into these people. Like you said, the Gram, you said 106 Gallery, like those places. Where do you find yourself frequenting some places more than others because of the type of people that hang out there, because you almost feel more comfortable there? Or is it more like you just go where the events or people recommend to you to go? Or do you have your like local hangouts?
I definitely have my local hangouts. I think in my local hangouts, and the reasons I've explored those spaces hasn't necessarily been part of my arts journey, but it has definitely been part of my journey in exploring more and getting more connected and integrated within my community itself and being more involved with the community. My local spots, honestly.
Spill the beans.
Yeah, okay. I have a neighborhood dive bar that I work a lot from. That's my spot. There's a lot of regulars there. It's very much that old school sort of Cheers vibe. So there's like, oh, there's Jack, there's Eric. He's always here, right? So it's nice to become ingratiated in that way and have those sort of regular interactions with people. But they're also they're definitely that's my local spot. That's more my, I think, space for decompression and connection with people I know I can feel safe having whatever conversations I want to have. That's really my thing. I think for sort of connecting with arts and having those sort of regular spaces, a lot of it has been understanding that arts and cultural things are happening in all these smaller spaces. And every time I go into something, they're like, even a lot of places on our main strip down, there's a road called Division. There are a bunch of different art galleries down there, which are great. There's Art Rat, there's 106 Gallery, there's even like vintage clothing stores are arts adjacent when you think about it. They do like DIY things. They make their own clothes. You just start realizing that if I like fashion, I like to buy clothes, I like to buy secondhand. That's still part of that community. And those same people that are working in those spaces and frequenting those spaces lead you to the other spaces. So that's been a lot of the arts sort of places where I go.
So what I find interesting is that a lot of your experiences revolve around like in real life interaction. And I was wondering, do you have any digital sort of outlets where you connect with these individuals, these communities, or is it purely is your main drive focusing on like meeting in person around activities?
I do have a few. I think I utilize like digital tools like social media in a very small sense now in order to find those places to engage in person. I've found that there have been some different experiences, and especially with the way tech is evolving, that allow those digital interactions to really lead to better real life interactions. For example, there's been somebody who worked with Art Prize with us created a scavenger hunt tool. It was a company called Whisk AR. So they had a digital scavenger hunt tool. And that sort of spearheaded a lot of interactions with people maybe who were just kind of exploring with that, but created those conversations in person and created some focus on the art that was occurring during Art Prize. So that has been a really interesting tool to explore and to see how AR and maybe some more interactive components sort of bring that digital overlay into that real life and cause people to be in the same space and connect. I think the biggest and the most time that I can recall really using digital tools was when we were all isolated during COVID. You know, that was so abrupt and so quick for everyone to be removed from their social circles. So that became a very important thing for myself and my family to have those digital interactions that created that sense of connection. What did I use during COVID? I think I was very active at that time. It was probably on Facebook or Instagram, really to kind of connect with people and find ways that, like, you know, how do we create this connection? How do we find our communities and stay involved in the communities and support the things that we can't do in person that are hurting? We hosted arts then as well. The Civic Theater, which is a local theater company in our area, they did driveway show tunes type things. So I hosted people in my backyard, socially distanced, and they would come and behind a line sing a song to all of us, and they would just come periodically for like an hour and a half, and we just did donations. So, you know, a way to support these things that created these connections in person by finding out about them online through Instagram, through Facebook, booking that, and then having somewhat of a personal interaction. But yeah, that was the main time I think I really embraced more of the digital tech with that.
Yeah, so I suppose now you're more focused on, well, you're a very outgoing personality, and I think that's I would say, like, what would you say to the people that like aren't sort of as outgoing or as sort of socially confident as you are?
Oh wow, I think I'm super introverted, actually.
It's like walk into a random gallery and start talking to people is it's not easy. I mean, I would also find that like just walking up and talking to a random person isn't the easiest thing to do. So even someone's an extrovert, right? So like, I think maybe that's potentially sometimes a barrier for people, because I think once like you said, like once you break down that barrier and you have that initial conversation, standing next to a mural with someone and saying, "What do you think?" that opens up that door. I think it's the opening of the door that sometimes is probably the hardest part, whether you're an extrovert or introvert, because sometimes people are more confident in other things depending what you're at. Because like you said, and that's why sometimes a digital outlet for some people is a lot easier from a barrier to entry perspective. But then I suppose the satisfaction and the feel good vibes that you get from an in-person activity and interaction of making that connection is a different feeling than a digital connection.
Yeah, I think it definitely can be. But I think, you know, like you're saying, those digital tools, because people have different levels of comfort with other people, especially now. I see that in my son, teenagers, especially now, just going through COVID and being in high school after 3-4 years of isolation. It's harder for them to engage in person. They're not used to it anymore. Digital, I think, can be this bridge to these bigger in-person connections. And I think being in a space too, where maybe you're in like a meetup group or you're in a Reddit group and you're engaging with these same people and talking about a shared interest. And then it ends up like, okay, now let's actually meet up. Like, I know people who are involved in like board game groups, and they don't see these people outside of their monthly board game get together, but they talk to them all the time on Reddit. So there's like maybe this sense of comfort that is happening by these digital interactions, these digital like conversations that allow them to go into that space and feel more comfortable when they're seeing each other in person. And that can, I think, after this happens and you become more used to the in-person interactions and you feel connected, and you understand you're with people who have these shared interests, it can lead to maybe more confidence, and you will walk up to somebody and ask them a stupid question. So that's
I think
thing.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think I think also boils down that you mentioned a bit earlier about the passion, right? Like the passionate people are more welcoming, right? It's just because they just want to share their love of whatever it is, whether it be a sport or an art or whatever it might be. They just want to share it. So like from like your side, you're very passionate. Like what motivates you to stay so engaged in the community? Like what is that thing that says that you keep on doing it? Like why?
So I think what motivates me most is this community, is Grand Rapids. I moved here over 15 years ago from right outside of Washington, D.C. I was told, I moved here blind. I was told it was the second biggest city in Michigan. And I can recall walking to the signs where it was showing you where everything is. And it was just these like circles. And it was like everything in this circle is within a 5-minute walk. And I think I burst into tears. Because I was like, I've done this walk. There's nothing else. There's nowhere else to go. It was different. I was moving from a place where that had this vibrancy and this history already, and it was a city, to a place that was really coming into its own, especially 15 years ago. And I think we're still growing and we're still evolving. But I think I was determined to like, this is my home, and I'm going to be involved here, and I'm going to explore it, and I'm going to understand it. And that really, I think, was my motivation, because I care about the place I live. And that means I'm part of multiple things. There's this idea of social infrastructure, these public places, these third spaces, really being this catalyst for community building and connection and vibrancy for cities and towns. There's a book called Palaces for the People, and it talks a lot about public libraries, especially, how they are this place, this glue of social infrastructure that provides different benefits for different people. It is this space anyone can go. If you're homeless, if you're studying for school, if you're just really into reading, which obviously I am. You can see behind me. You can't even see half of it. It's bad in here. But it's creating of these dynamic spaces that allow for a variety of communities to connect, a variety of people to maybe cross connect, and a variety of activities that can occur within them. I think that's what's so important. And I think being part of an arts event, where maybe it's a temporary arts event, we can create these sort of proving grounds or testing spaces within the city to see what allows people to have these sort of spontaneous interactions and create connection and find commonality with each other, or find spaces like, what does that look like? What does this become? And how do we continue to explore that and create a more vibrant city? So I think that's really been my sort of drive and focus, and sort of like the direction I kind of went with my education and my career, because that's always been what's important to me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Still processing that you just said, because there's a lot to unpack inside that. Because okay, you go ahead. I was just
absolutely. I know it's very impressive. And it, but what I was thinking of is, because COVID, I think, had a great impact on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I almost feel like everyone I know has changed since then. It's really shaped our personality in some ways, whether it is I feel like some people have realized that they really just, are, after COVID, they became even more social, or, they became, so it either amplified the extrovert side or introvert, but more like, I feel like people got so used, like you said, in the indoors and not socialized, so it was harder to get those social relations in that sense back to how it was pre-COVID for people. And I'm curious, like, what are, for lack of a better word, like trends, or what are the things that you've spotted on people? It could be during the event of ArtPrice or outside of it, on the way they're compensating their social interaction needs, in a sense. Or what are some of the things that you've observed, whether it is within the arts community, or like, are you seeing people in ArtPrice that are like, really exploring and kind of keeping their connection with the art community? I'm talking about the newcomers in a sense, and keeping the interaction there, or are they just, during Art Prize and then it just dies down with people? And that's just one of the examples. It could be anything else, just people-wise.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, COVID was a dramatic shift for everyone in the way that we approached engagement and interaction. And this is across sectors, right? This is not necessarily just personal community connections. This is our kids in school going, like my kid graduated preschool on Zoom, work, the nature of work shifted and changed. And I think has permanently shifted in this country with how we decide, how we have realized that we can accomplish work and what that looks like and what those spaces look like. And I think there's still a shift there, and I could speak to work because my education and my degree, and I got my master's during COVID, is in organizational change, leadership. So focusing a lot on the nature of work and what is work, what does that look like? How do we run organizations well? What does that mean to run an organization well? Who's the benefactor of that, right? So I think there was almost a sense in work now to shift back to a norm, a pre-COVID norm, but that's never going to happen, right? There were benefits and detriments to what COVID showed us because we were forced to remove from a engaged physical space. I think both encouraged a lot of creativity, utilizing digital spaces in order to have connection, in order to accomplish work goals. But it also created a lot of barriers and a lot of difficulty in being able to find consensus and really sort of know how to be together again and how to remove that serendipitous innovation that can occur when we're all in the same room. I think, especially with younger generations who are now just entering the workforce, who haven't had that experience working that job in person after like this isolation, and it's creating a lot of generational sort of gaps with that. For me, work communities, social communities, I think ideally what needs to happen is there needs to be interactions across interest and discipline to some sense. So that creates more innovation, more creativity, more ways for all of us to experience and move forward from maybe the barriers and things that COVID has created and things that have come after it. And this epidemic of loneliness that we are in, and so much research has said that we're in that, right? So we have to use those experiences and the things that we gained and recognize the things we lost and come back in a space that builds the best of both of those, because we're never going to be like we were before COVID.
Yeah, I think you raise a lot of good points from a work and a social perspective. Like work also is a form of community, right? Your people that you have, there are a flock. I mean, that's why there are third spaces, right? You got your home, you got your work, and you've got your leisure, right? So the idea of the future of work is the same as the idea of future of socialization. Like how do you remain social? How do you actually benefit from that? And I think you're right. I think there's definitely a lot of research more on the younger generation teens coming up of what that challenge looks like. I think even today a book was released. It's called The Anxious Generation.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt, right?
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt. Yeah, and it's like he's like really pushing for like a lot of things. He's trying to get policy changed on like social media policies and cell phone policies, because you're right. Like you said, your son, that transitionary period of it's a lot to take in. It's hard enough as an adult. I can imagine how it must be like on a younger generation that hasn't sort of experienced as much in life.
Yeah, and I haven't read his book yet. I've read a lot of things
No,
about it.
yeah. I'm ordering the book today. I think.
Yeah.
I only saw that it got launched today, but I think it got launched about a week ago. But yeah. I do want to read it to unpack some of the things that he takes a look at.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's his sort of. His previous books as well are very much like there are these things that we're not considering, and we need to figure out how to address this idea of cancel culture. And with some of his previous books, what does this mean? A lot of his books and his work focuses on this idea of connection and community across things. What I think is, I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry. There's definitely, I don't know if it's so much policy change that needs to happen, but I think what needs to happen is we need to, as a country, as local communities, understand that there's not simple answers to these complex problems. And we need to figure out how we can all start to think critically or continue to think critically, and not so much self-isolate. I think we get very homogenous sometimes in our solutions to these loneliness issues and issues around COVID. Like, we think there's a singular path to finding a solution in order to fix all these things that have happened. And what we need to do is be more cross-disciplinary and find ways to interact with people maybe we don't always interact with in order to discover these better solutions to the things that Jonathan Haidt's talking about, especially with youth. It's not maybe necessarily just social media policy. There's other things there. It's a mental health thing. That is what's happened. It's what we lost is, and what we maybe never had, is this infrastructure within this country to deal with things like what happened to people during COVID, especially with their mental and emotional health. We didn't have that. And that's the cusp, that's the root of it, right? So
yeah,
building community, having these social interactions there's so much research on that too. Like, that is a stabilizing factor in people's life. And that was taken away and sometimes even more increasingly isolated for people during COVID. Maybe they didn't have it at all, but whatever little they did have was totally removed because we couldn't engage like we did. So how do we build our mental health system in this country to support those things? And community in the arts especially can do that, right? Like, those third spaces where you can have this interaction with others in a healthy and wonderful way. And I think that's the value of finding flocks and finding people that share, maybe not share interest, maybe have different opinions, but there's something in there that allows you to be in that space and engage.
Yeah, and you've said great points, Tiffany. I think it's a good point for us to sort of round up, because I think it's a good spot of like finding your flock, which is what we get to talk about. Is that from you, as you can see, it's a very complex thing. It's age-based, it's interest-based, it's personality-based, all these different complex factors of the reason why we want to do this series is that everyone has a different way of finding their flock. Every flock acts in a different way. Some people, like you say, walk into galleries and meet people. Some people meet digitally and then transition to an in real life situation. So yeah, thank you so much for all your insights. I'm going to hand it over to Oak and see if any closing remarks, and then we'll go from there.
I've got one more question, a very brief one for Tiffany before we close. I thank you so much for all the insights, Tiffany. I think those are very valuable. But if we were to summarize, if a person wants to get into a community, whether it is, on the mental health side of things, or it's a need, to have the social interactions and to be part of a community, or to feel part of a community. For anyone that wants to get involved, for anyone that wants to join a community within Grand Rapids and have a social circle, what are the 3 do's and don'ts that you would, briefly share with those people that want to join, whether it is arts community or any other community that you're part of, any other flock that you're part of? Would love to hear that.
Wow, it's a lot. Okay, 3 do's and don'ts to start engaging with communities in Grand Rapids. Okay, I would say do you ask the stupid question if you're in a public space with someone? Do you ask the question you don't want to ask? If somebody's there and they seem knowledgeable about something and you're interested in it, take a deep breath and ask it. Because if they're like I said, if they're passionate about it, they're going to be happy someone is engaged. Do go to a place you normally wouldn't and see what opportunity that brings you. I think that's important too. If you walk past a place and are always curious about it and maybe you're interested in that, just walk in. Just walk in. Grand Rapids has a really vibrant small business community, and business owners here are very much engaged and want to serve and be with their customers and respond to those questions. And that could be a restaurant, that could be an art gallery, that could be a vintage clothing store. Just walk in. I guess I would say and this is for any city, do explore your city, do explore your space, your community where you live. Seek out ways to just engage with it more. If it's volunteering, if it's participating in like a local festival or event, or attending an event, or even like a late night happy hour, just go to something. I would say don't discredit or assume that there's no value in maybe things like digital tools for that, right? I think sometimes too, I was speaking so much about doing things in person, but there is definitely a value in utilizing tools like Reddit or just social media, even if you're not like a social media person, and just finding out about these events and spaces. So don't discredit the value that the digital can have, and maybe can play into actually building a strong network and community for you. Another don't assume that, like, I guess this is a more personal thing. Like, if you are introverted, don't let that be a barrier for you. So there's a lot of wonderful introverted people too. There's a silent reading group we have here. You can go to something like that. There's activities and places for you. If you don't actually want to talk to somebody, but you want to do something with people, you can do things like that. They exist. You don't have to talk to anybody, but you can be in that space, and then maybe it'll lead to something else. And maybe that's all you need, and that's fine too. And I guess don't assume that there is one right way to find your flock and find your community. There are so many interests and places and then people here. So do what you need to do to make that happen.
That's amazing, Tiffany. And, I'm curious, next time I come to Grand Rapids, I want to go to the silent reading. Where is that? Would you share with, everyone that be listening or watching this? Where's that? How can they find that place?
I'm not sure. I know I think they have a meetup page, and they got a lot of press about it, and it got real big, and then they had to rebook it. So lots all over the city, different places. Yep. Brilliant.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. It was a great pleasure to get this series starting with you. I think you've set the bar high now for anyone else who's going to be the next episodes. And I want to thank everyone who's watching. And we're going to have these series as we go. Stay tuned for the next one. It's going to be a very interesting community with very interesting insights. And in the comments, feel free to ask any questions, and those might be the next series that we talk about particular things. So thanks, everyone, and see you in the next one.
Thank you.